Good morning. Today I'm going to contrast two theories of the good, that is, two moral theories with one another, and I'm going to do so by starting off by asking a question. And that question is, are we good because we do good things, or do we do good things because we are good? Now, depending on how you answer that question, how you answer that question will determine what theory side you land on in this case. The first theory would be duty ethics, otherwise known as deontology, and this is popularized by Immanuel Kant. And the other theory is virtue ethics, otherwise is eudaimonism, perhaps. And this could be said to be popularized by, or at least started by Aristotle, later on dealt with probably by, several philosophers. There are Thomas Aquinas, there are some, a lot of contemporary philosophers who follow this nowadays. But we have to ask the question, though, at the end of the day, what, why do I do the things I do? Do I do it merely because they're my duty? Or do I do my duty because I am a good person? If we start off with, say, Aristotle and the concept of virtue ethics, we want to know what it means to be a good person. Now, we can sit there and say a good person does good things. Now, Aristotle would have said that we needed to be trained in such a way that we become virtuous people, and that from that virtue, good acts flow, that we will do these things naturally because we have developed something in ourselves, this concept of virtue. And we practice or develop eudaimonia, which is the Greek word for happiness. So, for example, when Thomas Jefferson wrote in the Declaration of Independence that all men are created equal, and we all are endowed with certain unalienable rights, such as life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This is what he's talking about. He's not talking about pleasure. He's not talking about the pursuit of whatever we want, whatever we arbitrarily consider happiness. He's talking about the pursuit of the good and moral, virtuous life. And so Aristotle would suggest that we have to develop ourselves to become these types of people. Now, how do we do so? I mean, he spells it out in his book, The Nicomachean Ethics. And a lot of this has to do with those who are in power, those who are wise, even our parents, developing this in us from the time we were children. And thus, in this development of us becoming virtuous people, we will recognize that which is good naturally, and we will pursue that because we are the types of people who will value that which is good. Now, contrast this with Immanuel Kant, who is going to still answer the question as to what the good is, but he's going to suggest we are good people because we do that which is good. It is our duty, and so we could have a bad person do good things, right? This is our problem here. Is we could have we could have a bad person do good things, and we could have a good person do bad things. And that seems odd, because, virtuous people should naturally do the good things. Well, Immanuel Kant is going to give us two ways to determine that which is good. And he's going to give us two types of goods in a sense. He's going to call one the hypothetical imperative. Now, the hypothetical imperative is, simply put, it says, if I want this, then I ought to do that. That's how we develop the ought, remember? If I want to lose weight, I ought to cut my calories below the amount I normally burn in a day, and I also ought to exercise to burn some more calories. Thus, I will have burned off more calories than I took in, and I will lose weight as a result. I ought to do this if I want to lose weight. It's contingent upon the if. Now, if I want to have good family relations, say with my wife, I ought not cheat on her. So you can see that these things are highly determined by often the self. If I don't want to go to jail, I ought not break the law. Now, what if a person doesn't care? And he goes, well, I don't care if I go to jail. Well, then it doesn't follow that he ought not break the law. And so that only carries weight when one feels that he needs to fulfill the duty for something else. It's hypothetical. It's only if the person sees there to be something else he is pursuing and it requires this. Now, then there's the categorical imperative. Now, the categorical imperative says something like this. If I cannot imagine a possible world in which certain act, we'll call it S, is something I would want to happen to me, then I ought not do it. So, for example, if I cannot imagine a possible world, say, in which I would like to be lied to or cheated on, we'll go with the same theme, then it follows that I ought not do that same act to anybody else. If I cannot imagine a possible world in which I would like to be murdered under any circumstance, then I ought not to commit that crime, that murder, that act, in any circumstance to anybody else. And so now what we get is called the categorical imperative. We could universalize it based on the idea that I cannot conceive of a possible world in which I would have said act done to me. If I cannot imagine a possible world in which I would like my stereo stolen, then I ought not steal anybody else's. Now, of course, at the end of the day, it's still based on you and your desires. You can't imagine a possible world in which anybody would do this to you. But why would you not want anybody to do this to you? And you say, well, because it's wrong. Well, yeah, it's wrong based on what? And it's wrong because I can't imagine a possible world where I want it. So they go, well, why don't you want it? Well, because it's wrong. So you can see the circular reasoning in this, and that's not to say it doesn't have a ring of truth to it. It just says I don't. I'm just saying that I don't know if it fully answers the question of why we should not want this. Does it really answer what the good is? Now, with virtue ethics, it tells us that we ought to train ourselves to be good so that we do good acts. But then again, how do we know that which is good? Now, of course, Aristotle will spell that out for us, but in our short time, I just wanted to contrast two views. That is the idea of doing good things because you are a good person with being good because you do good things. Now, remember, a good person, let's take Mother Teresa. Could you imagine Mother Teresa ever lying? Well, it's hard to imagine that she has never done anything wrong. But we'd all agree that, I hope at least we'd all agree, that she was a good person, very charitable, very nice, very giving, selfless, kind, peaceful, patient, all they like. And yet, good person, very moral. But yet, it's hard to imagine that she would not do some bad things. Contrast this with Adolf Hitler. Could you imagine that Adolf Hitler ever did anything good? Well, I suppose he did. I suppose he could have been kind to his friends, that he told his mother he loved her, that he gave some nice gifts and was charitable to some people. I mean, we have plenty of people in America who are very bad people. Very bad people. But it's hard to believe that they've never done anything good. So does that make them good because they did good acts? Well, they did some good acts, but I mean, what about their personhood? Are they virtuous people, as Aristotle would spell out? And I'd argue, no, they're not. I mean, it's not all or nothing. Certainly, maybe a sliding scale 1 to 10. But you look at the average drug dealer on the street. Take the television show Breaking Bad. The guy's out there doing very bad things, and you ask, is this a good person or a bad person? He's clearly doing illegal things, things that hurt people, yet he's doing it for a motive to help his family. Uh, where does the goodness lie? What ought he do? Should he do the good act of help his family? Should he do the um, or should he stop and obey the law and stop hurting others? Where does his actions come from? Is it because he's a good person? Is this making him a good person or a bad person the more he sells drugs? And you see he's becoming a bad person. So from a virtue point of view, he's developing himself in the wrong way. He's taken in those types of things that make him an unvirtuous person. We could take the types of music we listen to. Plato certainly felt that music could influence you towards virtuous or unvirtuous actions and states of being. So, I mean, talk about the movies we watch, the books we read, and we asked the friends we hold, one apple, bad apple spoils a whole bunch. You've heard that before, I hope. You ask, are we doing the things that develop virtue in our lives? Now, that's a virtue theorist way to go. Without beating this horse, I'll get this video out to you. I'd like you to be able to explain the difference just in a couple paragraphs, 2 paragraphs. Don't overthink it. So give me as an assignment 2 paragraphs contrasting the 2 theories, and I will look forward to getting your work. Thank you.